Okay, so um, the thing that people ask me most often is what is dream yoga? Because there's a lot of in different spaces, there's a lot of uh, discourse about lucid dreaming, dream practices, dream work, all these sorts of things. So in both the Buddhist space, but also the New Age space, we hear a lot about dream work and lucid dreaming, and also in the non-dual sort of space, we have a lot of people talking about lucid dreaming, and also in consciousness studies, there's a lot of talk about lucid dreaming as well. So in various different spaces, there's all this kind of talk about the significance of dreams and how we can use them for our benefit. So, but in this context, in a Buddhist context, dream yoga is a practice that utilizes lucid dreaming to lead to awakening. So the primary way it does that is that it reveals the reality as it is. It reveals how things really are, and it reveals what we really are, as opposed to who we think we are. So that's a very basic sort of idea. We can use lucid dreams to awaken to the true nature of reality as it is, without our dualistic fabrications and delusions on top of it. And we can recognize our own nature through lucid dreaming. That's it fundamentally. But dream yoga also has a daytime component. So when we talk about dream yoga, there's all this emphasis on the nighttime part when we're asleep. But actually, there's a very important daytime part. And in fact, in Padmasambhava's teachings on the six bardos, which have been translated to English multiple times, he makes it very clear that daytime practice is essential for succeeding in the nighttime practice, the actual dreaming part. So these two things go hand in hand. In the Tibetan tradition, and dream yoga is primarily from the Tibetan tradition because it's first taught by really in detail by Padmasambhava, and then that's revealed as Tama by Kamalingpa. Other Tibetan masters in the Nyingma tradition have also revealed dream yoga texts. That being said, later, like 1,000 years later, we have dream yoga coming through in the Kagyu tradition. Particularly, you see it in the six yogas of Naropa or the six yogas of Niguma, the great female Mahasiddha. And then from there, it flows into the Sakya school and then the Gelugpa school finally. And there's also a tradition of dream yoga that comes from the great fifth Dalai Lama, which was a terma, which he received from Padmasambhava in visions. So it's there in all of the Tibetan traditions. This, however, doesn't mean that it is an innovation, really. Because although in the Mahayana tradition and the Sutrayana tradition, we don't see a lot of discussion of bardos per se. We do in the Mahayana a bit, but in Sutrayana not very much at all. And this despite the fact that the Buddha made quite clear that there are different moments when we can become enlightened. And one of the moments that he outlined in the sutras, in the early sutras, that we can become enlightened is in the bardo. The Pali word for that is antarabhava, which means intermediate or in between abode. So he mentions it as one of the places where we can become awake. It's traditionally been interpreted, that sutra, to mean in between this life and the next. So in the bardo of dying. However, as far as I can tell, it doesn't explicitly rule out the other bardos. So it doesn't rule out the bardo of dreaming, and it certainly doesn't rule out the bardo of samadhi or meditation. And the reason why I think the Sutrayana tradition has interpreted it to mean just at the time of dying is because later on that list of moments of awakening, times when we can become awake, the Buddha explicitly talks about samadhi, meditation, the moment that we're in samadhi, the moment of being in meditation or in samadhi. So they assumed that meant that he just meant dying at that point, but there's also dreams, and also other bardos, bardo becoming, etc., etc. So there's other places. So although dream yoga is considered to be Tibetan, it has its roots in Sutra and Mahayana. So there's the Pali Sutra, where the Buddha lists these are the moments we can become awake, and then there's a Mahayana or Sanskrit Sutra where there's a teaching about what to do to prepare for the time of dying. And those two sources are essentially the kernels for the whole dream yoga tradition in Tibet. Now, as I said, it originates with Padmasambhava in Tibet. He's the first person to teach it. And then it's a very important text, the Vajratara, is revealed by Kamalingpa in the 1300s, which is way later. And in that text, all of the Bardo practices are kind of brought together, and they're made very tantric in that text. So, in essence, dream yoga is about awakening to reality as it is, and about awakening to our true nature, our Buddha nature, which in the Nyingma tradition or in Dzogchen we might call Rigpa. So that's what it's about. It's awakening to reality and awakening to our nature, which are fundamentally the same thing. Now, when we talk about awakening to reality as it is, we need to kind of take a bit of a step back and talk about samsara, which is reality as we currently experience it from our unawakened state. Now, samsara has three qualities. The one that is given a lot of press and attention is that it is permeated by suffering. You know, when we talk about samsara, we talk about realm of suffering. But it has three qualities, right? That one, it's permeated by suffering. It's cyclical, which means it is characterized by miserable birth, miserable life, miserable death, another miserable birth, miserable life, another miserable death, etc. On and on and on. And if without intervention, nothing's eternal, right? But it is almost like that. It just goes on for almost forever. Without intervention, it just keeps going. And the dream yoga is an intervention into that cycle. The other quality of samsara is that it's illusory. Some translations of the word samsara are illusory existence. You know, so we see samsara translated as cyclic existence, illusory existence, suffering existence. That's because these are the three qualities that it has. I'll just repeat. Permeated by suffering, cyclical, and the really significant one for us today, illusory. It is illusory. What reality as we perceive it from our deluded dualistic state is not how it is. It is not at all how it is. So dream yoga intervenes on all three of those levels. So, number one, illusion. It intervenes by revealing samsara or reality, revealing that samsara isn't even real. And it reveals reality as it is, luminous, spacious awareness. That's what reality is. Or the Dharma Dhatu or Dharmakaya, if you want to use the words, the Buddha words, the Buddhist words. So dream yoga is a technique for directly experiencing the illusory nature of samsara. Okay, number one. So it breaks that aspect of samsara. Number two, it removes suffering or dissolves suffering, because when you see the illusory nature of things, our attachment and our aversion dissolves. There's absolutely no point being attached and craving after mirages, fabrications. So our attachment dissolves. Likewise, our aversion dissolves, because there's no point being afraid or hating or disliking or being angry at something that's a mirage, a fabrication of the dualistic mind. It's not there in the way we think it's there, right? So our attachment and aversion dissolve. Why? Because our ignorance has been resolved. We know what reality is now, what our true nature is now. That's ignorance, right? And ignorance is the root of attachment and aversion. So you can see here that that second quality, that other quality of samsara, the permeated by suffering, is dissolved by dream yoga, by removing our ignorance. Now the third one, the cyclical thing, is a really kind of exciting one, I suppose. Dream yoga addresses that by providing a doorway into total liberation in a single lifetime through the Buddha of dying. Because although dream yoga has these profound right now benefits in terms of destroying ignorance, dissolving attachment and aversion, helping us to see how things really are and understand what we really are, it also has this end-of-life opportunity, because it provides a doorway into total liberation at the time of dying, because in the Buddha of dying, essentially what you experience is like a dream. You know, it's very much like a dream. All of this stuff arises to the mind that is projected by the dualistic mind, the deluded mind. It all ramps up and you're seeing it all there. And if you have experience in dream yoga, you just kick back and chill. It's like, oh, more of this again, this illusory display. And if you can kick back and chill at that time, when our true nature dawns in the bardo of dying, because what obscures the bardo of dying? The dualistic mind. What happens when you die? The dualistic mind dies. It's no longer an obstacle. It's gone. So naturally, there's an opportunity for liberation. And if you have glimpsed through your dream yoga or other practice in life your true nature, then in the Buddha of dying, you can recognize that the minute it dawns and embrace that, recognize that, merge with that, whatever language you want to use, and be free totally and completely. Guess what? The cyclical nature of samsara is thus broken. No more miserable rebirth, no more miserable life, no more miserable death. That cycle's broken. You're free. It's what's called total liberation. So this dream yoga is really quite extraordinary in that sense. It addresses all of the three fundamental downsides to samsaric existence, and it does them in a very simple way by using this faculty that we already have, dreaming. Everyone dreams, you know, against our dualistic mind. All right, so that answers what is dream yoga, which is, people always ask me what this is and is it different to lucid dreaming? The answer is yes. Lucid dreaming is fun, you know, nothing wrong with lucid dreaming, and it can be a way to step into dream yoga. But lucid dreaming is not motivated by the wish to be free of suffering and cyclic existence. and the wish that all sentient beings be free from that too. Lucid dreaming is just a sort of, the non-duality bros having fun while they're asleep. It's not a bad thing, but it's not going to lead to liberation or awakening for anyone. So dream yoga is different to that. It's also different to dream work. Dream work is a kind of Carl Jungian thing, a psychological thing that is about recognizing the subconscious currents in one's personality. That's fine, but again, it won't lead to liberation. It won't lead to liberation for yourself nor for anyone else. So dream yoga is different because it's motivated by that. And how do we know that it's motivated by that? Because it's in the name. I mean, in English anyway, dream yoga, right? What is yoga? Yoga is union, oneness, non-duality. So it means using dreams to go there. What is oneness, non-duality? It's awakening, right? So it's about moving towards awakening, freedom from suffering. So that's kind of a basic definition. Other than saying that, dream yoga has some components, which we'll go through. And depending on what type of dream yoga it is, depends on what components are there. But generally speaking, there's a little bit of, depending what kind, there's visualization, sometimes mantra, sometimes postures, sometimes like in terms of how you go to sleep, what posture you're in, and there's the daytime work that you do to prepare for that. All right, so the second most common question that I'm asked is dream yoga difficult? Now, this relates to what I said before, a moment ago, about different kinds of dream yoga, right? So tantric dream yoga is very difficult. I don't know very many people who've had any success with it. I asked a Lama many years ago about the success rate of this practice, because a lot of people had said to me that they'd tried it and hadn't really gotten anywhere with it. And I just asked this Lama, what's the success rate? And he said, and he whispered it so that his attendants didn't hear, the success rate is not great. The fail rate is more than 90%. And then he said, but don't tell anyone I said that. Because he's written books about dream yoga. So he didn't want to come off as promoting something that wasn't going to work, And the reason that the success rate is so low is because of the type of dream yoga people do. And that's because, generally speaking, when we talk about dream yoga, we think of tantric Buddhism. And in the Nyingma tradition, most of the dream yoga practices come from the Maha Yoga and the Anu Yoga. I'm not going to go into all the yanas and stuff, but these are high level things, but not the highest, So, and they mostly come from those spaces. And what we need to know about Maha Yoga and Anu Yoga, they almost always require empowerment, and they depend completely on what we call Kyerim, generation stage practice, or skills in generation. What is generation? Being able to visualize in very precise, perfect, vivid detail a meditation or deity and a complex mandala around that deity. So from my own personal experience, talking to people who've tried dream yoga from the Maha or Anu Yoga, like tantric dream yoga, the reason they didn't succeed is because they didn't have the level of generation stage skill that you need for that kind of practice. So in dream yoga, there's a number of steps to dream yoga, which we'll go over later, but the first step obviously is recognizing you're dreaming. But then there's work you do inside the dream, right? And that work, according to the tantric dream yoga or the tantric perspective depends or relies on that completion Kyarim style practice, being able to visualize very lucidly and precisely thousands of details, right? It depends on that. And most people, whether you're Tibetan, Bhutanese, Nepalese, English, Australian, Chinese, African, whatever, I'm trying to think of other kinds of nationalities, tons. French, German, Dutch, Malay, Burmese. You get the point. No matter where you're from or what tradition you're from, that skill takes a very long time to develop. Thousands of hours of practice, minimum. That's why in that kind of dream yoga, which requires empowerment, remember it's Maha or Anu yoga, anything in those spaces requires empowerment. They also usually require you to have completed Nundro. Why? Because they assume if you've completed Nundro, you will have developed that generation stage skill of being able to vividly and precisely visualize a meditational deity and the complex mandala around them, right? They assume if you've done Nundro, you should have that skill. The truth is very few people, even who have finished Nundro, even who have done, years and years of tantric practice, have that skill. It's a rare skill. And these days, we know that there's different kinds of mind or brain, if you like. Brain or the mind. We now understand that there's neurodiversity, that there's some people for whom visualization in precise detail is easy. But for many people, very difficult. And for some, and it's, I would say a significant number, impossible. Their neurodiversity means they just can't do it. They cannot do it, right? So that question, is it difficult? My answer is yes, if you're doing tantric dream yoga. Difficult. Fail rate, according to that one Lama and others I've spoken to, at least 90% fail rate. And in terms of people I know, very sincere, very committed practitioners, almost all of them have said they weren't able to get anywhere with it. Almost all of them, right? So difficult, yes. But then there's another kind of dream yoga that doesn't come from Tantra, that comes instead from the Dzogchen teachings. Now, this is the thing. There's 3 cycles of Dzogchen teaching: Sem day, long day, Menag day, right? Generally, in the Sem day, generally speaking, this kind of thing is mentioned in passing and is not really a focus. The Kunje Gyalpo, the kind of one of the root texts of the Sem day, it mentions dream yoga, I think, once in the entire many thousands of words, many thousands of words. However, it does appear in the long day and the Menag day quite commonly. And it is very different to tantric dream yoga. So this brings me to the next question that people always ask me: are there different types of dream yoga? I've just told you, yes, there are. There's dream yoga from the Maha Yoga tradition, which you tend to see more in the Kagyu, Sakya, and Gelugpa schools. There's also dream yoga from the Anu Yoga level or yana. That's what you generally see in the Nyingma, but you also see Maha Yoga and there's others as well below those. So that's what you generally see in the other schools. In the Nyingma tradition, it's usually Anu Yoga. And in the Dujon Tosa, which is my home, in a way, it's often associated with either Vajrakalaya, Troma Nakmo, or Dorje Drolo. So these 3 meditational deities who require empowerment and significant risks associated with their practice. All right. Now, this other type of dream yoga, which is what we're going to focus on, and I'll tell you why we're going to focus on it in a minute, it comes from Ati Yoga. So of the 9 Nyingmas, according to the Nyingma way of breaking things up, the 9 vehicles, Ati Yoga is the peak, pinnacle, top, highest. All this language is quite funny because when you actually get there to those teachings, they reject completely the idea of a ladder, of lower and higher practices. They reject completely the idea of advanced and simple as being even a binary that is meaningful. It just rejects all that stuff. But it's considered by, scholars and practitioners to some degree to be the ultimate, right? The ultimate pinnacle vehicle. It's the fastest. So we know that Tantric Buddhism, the other, what we call the rest of Vajrayana, lots of great masters have said that takes 7 lifetimes to achieve, right? Ati Yoga or Dzogchen takes 1. One of the reasons is because of this practice, but really the real reason is because of an aspect of this practice that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I don't want to spoiler alert right now. So, because I want to spend some time with it, I don't want to kind of like prefigure it, and then when we get there, we don't really pay much attention to it. So, in the Ati Yoga tradition, usually Menagde cycle of teachings. So I don't want to go into too many of these words, right? But there's the Mind series or Semday. There's the Luminosity series or the Long Day, and then there's that's also called the Space series. And then there's the Upadesha or Pith Instruction series, which is the Menagde, right? Most dream yoga you find in the Menagde, but you also find it in the Long Day as well. And as I said, it is mentioned in the Semday, but it is not the focus at all. And it's kind of almost mentioned as a thing that might happen for you. You might encounter non-duality in your dreams through practicing the core Semday practices. So it's not really a thing separate from the core Semday practices. Okay, I'm hoping that we're keeping up with all of these words. I do try not to use too many Tibetan, Sanskrit, Pali words, but unfortunately sometimes there's no way around it. All right, so I just want to make this stark difference, right? In the Sutayana, there are no dream yoga practices, right? Formal ones. And that's because of an interpretation of that sutra that I mentioned where the Buddha mentions one of the ways we can become awake is through the in-between state, Antarabhava or Bardo is the way we say it, intermediary state, right? He said that's one way. But because they interpreted that to mean just the Bardo of dying, they haven't really developed that, right? But they have developed sort of practices around dying, usually around chanting and stuff like that, and creating virtue, merit, positive mind, wholesomeness of mind, to address that bardo. They haven't really addressed the dream state at all. Then in the Mahayana, there's a little bit more kind of like discussion of it, but again, not a lot. But then when we come to Vajrayana, there's a lot. It's like a very important core practice, particularly for the original school, the Nyingma, and the Kagyu, because they're practice-oriented school, and anything that's like a way to awakening that bypasses conceptualization, study, rituals and ceremony. They love that and they grab hold of that. But then it also appears in the Sakya and the Gelugpo as well. So, but then there's another kind of dream yoga that is from the Dzogchen teachings that is, in the flavor of the Dzogchen teachings. It's not difficult. It's not complicated. It's simple. And it also relies on what all the Dzogchen teachings rely on, open-heartedness. So it's a very, very different sort of thing. All right. So I'm just keeping track of the time. So in terms of types, I'll briefly I'm not really going to go into too much detail about the sort of really tantric Yidam deity-based dream yoga because it is complicated, difficult, requires empowerment. Usually requires the completion of Nundro to do it. So I'm not going to go into it too much, but generally speaking, the most popular form of tantric dream yoga has Vajrasattva or Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara as the yidams. Those are the most widespread, right, across the 4 schools. Some have Buddha himself, Shakyamuni, as their meditational deity as well. So those 3 things are the things that we see across all of the Tibetan schools. Vajrasattva and sometimes Vajradhara as well. And Chenrezig, the main ones, right? Then in the Nyingma, however, we're a little bit different because, again, it's coming from Ana Yoga, which is this next stage up, that they are often Troma, who's the Rothwell Black Dakini. She is primarily understood to be about Chud, but there's also a dream yoga practice associated with her. There's one associated with George Rollo, but the really common one, primarily I think because of Dudjom Rinpoche, of the way he taught and how widely he spread it, there's a dream yoga associated with Vajrakalaya. So again, these require you to visualize the deity in very precise detail, to visualize the mandala that they're in very precise detail. They require you to sleep in a specific posture. So there's 2 usually that are promoted. One's the 7-point posture of Vairocana, so sitting up in your meditation seat, so not using a bed at all. And then the other posture is the lion pose, which is the pose the Buddha, the lion of the Dharma, laid in when he was dreaming, when sleeping, and also laid in when he was dying. So there's those 2, one lying down, one sitting up poses. Also, there's some, because it's Tantra, of course, it's all about elements and directions. So there's an idea that you need to face your head, the top of your head needs to be pointing in a specific direction, your face needs to be facing a specific direction. There's all of this stuff, right? But in the Hatha Yoga version of Dream Yoga, none of that matters. Your posture is not so important. There is an idea in those Dzogchen teachings even that certain postures are better for different types of people. So if you've got a very active mind, they suggest a certain sleeping posture on your left side. If you've got a very dull mind, on the right side. But from lineage to lineage it changes, So there's no standard. So something that this is a very important thing to get. There's no standard. From lineage to lineage, these things change dramatically. Visualizations change dramatically. The postures change, not dramatically, but they change. Whether or not you focus your visualization on your heart or top of your head or whatever, that changes as well. I had an interesting. We've been helping Jetsma Tenzin Palmer with her new book, and one of the things that was really, really clear about that book, about those teachings that she's giving commentary on, is how kind of like there was no standard to the translation, right, into English of that text she was giving commentary on, but also no standard Tibetan version. There were multiple Tibetan versions of that one thing, and sometimes very different and contradictory. So we had to kind of like put multiple versions of the sentences in so that people could get a sense of, oh, actually this is quite diverse and rich. It doesn't just mean one thing. So, and this is more true around practice texts, sadhanas and things. They're always like quite diverse and dependent on the lineage. All right. So what we're going to focus on this weekend is the Hatha Yoga or Dzogchen version of Dream Yoga. My teaching from this, I was taught Dream Yoga by Chogyal Lampa Norbu, taught kind of a Dzogchen Dream Yoga but also I received teachings from me on Karma Lingpa version. I also received teaching on this from a number of Kempos, Kenjen Suen Gyatso, Kempo Tenzin Norgay, Kempo Sonam Tenzin. And also some sort of like just sort of one-on-one advice from Nakpa Kamaloda Rinpoche. So it also have received the empowerment and transmission for certain Dzogchen texts around dream yoga, which are actually quite interesting. All right, so that's where I get my introduction from. But also I started doing this when I started practicing dream yoga when I was 18 or 19. I can't remember exactly. I think I was 18. And I started with a more tantric version. And I had some, we don't really talk about my practice experiences and stuff like that, particularly in the Dzogchen tradition. Dzogchen Rinpoche always said, shut your mouth, zip, 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 don't talk about it. But when we're kind of like trying to encourage other people to give a practice a try, it's important to kind of talk about our experience with it. So I had some movement with the tantric version, but it wasn't until I adopted the Dzogchen version that it really started to be beneficial to me. And I've been doing that version for 30 years, something like that. So, and in that time, I have refined it for myself. This is the other thing. You need to make the practices, you need to personalize the practices for yourself, what works for you. Because there's no point doing some text. This is a problem I have with these rituals and ceremonies and sadhanas that people do all the time, often in a language that is not their own language, often with really no understanding of what's being said, and in no way personal, in no way connected to their heart. And it's just doing something by rote. The Buddha, when he was talking about what's the first sign of progress in the Dharma, right? He said, no more reliance on rituals and ceremonies. This is really important. Saying things by rote, chanting things by, in a big group, when you don't really know what you're saying, when you don't really know what's happening, when you have no heart connection, that's a ritual. The Buddha said quite clearly, first initial sign of progress, you no longer depend on rituals. This is important. Your practice comes from your heart. It's not a ritual. And you might be using those out of forms, like the sadhanas and stuff. But if it's not a heart connection, if it's not coming from your heart, and if you haven't adapted it to you, it's just a ritual. It's hollow, and it won't lead to much, So, the other question that people often ask me about dream yoga is, what are the essential points? So there's what we call the practice components, right? The bits that you need that are essential to be able to get this practice to do what you want it to do. What do we want it to do? We want you to be able to recognize reality as it is. And we want to recognize our true nature, our Buddha nature, Rigpa, right? We want to recognize this. So there are practice components that are essential to making that happen. But there are some other sort of foundational points, that also in the tantric version, this is perhaps why they demand completion of Nundro, right? However, in the Dzogchen version, there's no demand that you do Nundro, but there is a foundation that's important. Now, and they're the foundation that are always universal to all Buddhists, understanding of emptiness. I think understanding is not right. Heart awareness of emptiness, heart awareness of impermanence, heart awareness of the illusory nature of all phenomena. heart understanding that awakening is real. Nirvana is true. This is possible. That's the underlying foundation. But then there's a very specific point that's really crucial that is almost universally missed. And Padmasambhava Baba, when he's talking about the six bardos, the teachings for the practices of the six bardos, he explicitly states why the practice won't work if it's not working for you. Why? People asked him, why is it not working for me? And he said, this is why. He didn't bother to ask them, who are you? What's your experience? What kind of practice have you done before? Tell me about your mother and father. He didn't tell me about your dreams. He didn't ask any of those questions because it didn't matter. It's always the same answer. Always the same answer for everyone. Number one reason dream yoga doesn't work, there's no devotion. I'm going to let that hang. This counts for tantric dream yoga. So dream yoga that might have Chenrezig at the center, Vajrasattva at the center, Shakyamuni Buddha at the center, Jojodrolo, Trama Nakpo, Vajrakala at the center. No devotion for the yidam won't work. But for this version of dream yoga, no devotion for your actual teacher, it won't work. Depends on that. That's the absolute foundation. I'll just extend that to say that, and I'm not the only person saying this. A lot of people say, because I'm a devotion bunny and I'm often talking and teaching about devotion, and devotion has been a very important part of my practice. People think, he's biased, he's just obsessed with this devotion thing. It's not like a thing. But other lamas, any lama with their soul, really will tell you devotion is fundamental to all practice, all, especially tantric practice. So there's the place where this is most readily findable, where you can see someone else saying the same thing, is Mingyur Rinpoche in an article he did for, I'm not sure if it's Lions Roar or Tricycle, maybe Lions Roar. He says this very boldly, and I quote him in my book, Luminous Awareness, and on the little book I've got about dream yoga. It's also in there. He says really very, very, very plainly, without devotion, tantric Buddhism doesn't work. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and that includes dream yoga. Now, this is the problem with that in terms of the tantric dream yoga, the one that's based on a yidam deity, a meditational deity. Devotion is very difficult to raise for a yidam deity, for, I wouldn't even say just Westerners, but for modern people, Anyone who's grown up in a modern environment, had a modern schooling, in Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, places like that, where you've got very kind of like science-based, evidence-based education from preschool or kindergarten or whatever you call it in your area of the world to grade 12, and then maybe you even went and did some college study, university study like that. It's very hard for modern people to have real devotion for a yidam. It's very difficult. Now, the other thing is, it's very hard for people who grew up in a more traditional setting, like in Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, to have devotion for a yidam whilst also simultaneously recognizing the empty nature of the yidam. So this balance is very hard to achieve for anyone. So like Dudjom Rinpoche said, and many other lamas have said, Dudjom Lingpa as well, and many, 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 that if you think the yidams are real, inherently existing beings, then that's harmful. and you won't accomplish the practice. So, but likewise, thinking that they're not at all real, another challenge because you can't have devotion. So it's a very, very difficult balance to find, right? For most people. Some people, no matter where they're born, Australia, Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal, Singapore, wherever, they are able to have great devotion for a yidam, whilst also understanding that they're manifestations of wisdom mind and not like real in like inherently existing in the way that we see other beings, you know? It's very difficult, and it's even hard to put in words actually, what I mean. So that's very, very hard balance to strike. And that's why you've got this 90% or more fail rate with things like dream yoga. Because there's no devotion. If there is devotion, it's this what I would call blind faith, which ignores the empty nature of the yidam. You know, it's very tricky. That being said, with a human guru, which is what Adi Yoga, Dream Yoga focuses on, a human guru, your aura, what we call a semzin or a seed syllable that represents the guru, it's much easier to have devotion because we all love other people. It's a very familiar feeling, you know, and then the devotion itself, the love itself, leads to a recognition of the empty nature, right? If that makes sense. It's a very different quality of thing, devotion for a yidam and devotion for a living teacher or a human teacher. Not, they might not be living right now. Now, I know in this day and age, that is a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of people to hear. And it is, many people are very suspicious of gurus. And I think they should be. There's so many fakes. They should be careful. You know, they should be suspicious. But many people take that to a kind of extreme where they have no trust of anyone who teaches. You know, none, zero. They will not do it. They will not go there. Lots of people, apart from that trust issue, which is real, there are fake gurus and there are many of them. Many of them. I can't emphasize this enough. There are many of them. And some of these fake gurus are wildly popular. Wildly popular. You know, you just have to look at the history of cults. Recent history of cults, not like going back thousands of years, but recent history of cults. These figures, despite having been exposed as rapists, torturers of animals, thieves, total fakes, abusers of women, these people are still wildly popular. Wildly, wildly popular. Why? It's samsara. That's why. It's very hard to find a true master. It's very, very hard. So I always say, just like, you know, that's why exactly why Holland Dalai Lama, when Judson Tenzin Palmer asked him this question about so many fake gurus, particularly these days, you know, Dalai Lama and this guru yoga thing, and how like if you have a toxic guru, it's very harmful. And Dalai Lama said, this is why I never encourage people to do guru yoga with anyone other than someone who's completely trustworthy. And the person he uses and encourages people to use is Shakyamuni Buddha himself, you know. And I think that's very wise because Shakyamuni Buddha is above reproach. There are others, of course, who are above reproach. My own guru, Dudjom Rinpoche, Kabje Togden Amchen. There are gurus who are just above reproach. You know, there are, but there are also a lot of fakes. You know, so and you know, Hamid Lama didn't say they need to be alive. You know, I find an interesting indication sometimes that someone's not quite sincere, a teacher is not quite sincere, is that they insist that you have a relationship with a living teacher. You have your teacher has to be alive. And they talk about, because they point out your faults, because they break your attachment, blah, 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 blah. That language is all very sadistic, you know. The Buddha never taught anything like that, you know. Padmasambhava never taught anything like that. Yeshe Sogyal never taught anything like that. You know, you don't need someone to point out your faults. You know, your friends and family are probably doing a pretty good job at that. And besides, in the Dzogchen tradition, we don't focus on dwelling on our faults, dwelling on our karma. We focus on what's really important, recognizing the true nature of mind and becoming free. You know, all this stuff about your faults and your failings, it's a sidebar. We need to be self-reflective, self-aware, understand we've got habitual tendencies that are sometimes really not very helpful, but everyone does. There's not, like, you know, sometimes I won't name names, but one particular guru, teacher who I have spent some time with, he said to me, you know, you need a teacher to point out all your failings and faults. And he wasn't talking about me, because I had a living teacher and have living teachers. He was talking about other people. And I kind of said, well, what about this tendency we have in the West of really undermining ourselves and having no confidence, and you know, our practice doesn't go anywhere because we have no confidence, Vajra confidence, you know, confidence in our Buddha nature. We have no confidence. And all this pointing out of faults and failings and dwelling on faults and failings, it really undermines that. And he said, oh, I don't care about that. I just want bums on seats. I just want them to come, you know. And at that moment, I thought, I'm kind of never coming here again. I'm never coming here again. Because if that's what you care about, bums on seats, people coming and paying for empowerments and stuff, your mind is not on their liberation, is it? So, and I'm not going to name that person because they're very popular and I don't want to get death threats, you know, but really that's what this person said. I just care about bums on seats. I want them to come. If I tell them they can just have Shakyamuni Buddha as their guru, they'll never come, you know. If I tell them they don't need me to work on them, they won't come, you know. So, you know, I mean, I don't think most Dharma teachers, great people, sincere, care about the well-being of suffering beings. They're fully committed to their students' welfare. Most, 99%. But there's a lot of Dharma teachers, and there is a bunch of toxic ones. You need to be aware. That's why here in Pristine Awareness, we only encourage people to practice Guru Yoga with beings who are above reproach. Dudjom Rinpoche, Kabjag Topten Amtrin, Shakyamuni Buddha. Really, Yeshe Sogyal, you know, there's a bit of a long list, but we make sure that they can be trusted, and therefore your Guru Yoga will not cause you trauma down the track. You know, when you find out this person's a fake, or this person's got all these very negative behaviors that I just can't accept, and then what do? You're stuck, you know. So your guru in this lineage, and this is not unique to us. It's actually quite common to Dzogchen. You focus your Guru Yoga on the person's liberated, awake beings, living Buddhas that you can trust. You know, and it's not a short list by any means, but it's also not a massive list. Not every tulku, not every Rinpoche, not every Kempo, not every Geshe should be the focus of your Guru Yoga. All right, let's have a break and then we'll come back. When we come back, we'll talk about the components, the practice components, how you actually do it. And then we'll have a Q&A and we'll do the long for the Kamalingpa. All right, so we'll have let's say a 5 to 10 minute, or let's say 5-minute break so that we can use amenities, have water, etc. And then we'll come back. Thanks, everyone. All right. So if we all come back from our break, that'd be lovely. All right. So I'll just do a quick recap. Um, so dream yoga utilizes a capacity that we already have, lucid dreaming, to lead to our ability to recognize reality as it is and to recognize our true nature or Buddha nature. It counters all of the three aspects of samsara: its suffering nature, its cyclical nature, its illusory nature. There are different types of dream yoga. There's many kind of tantric versions, and there's also versions that come from Dzogchen. A fundamental aspect of tantric dream yoga is generation stage skill. So visualizing in precise detail, luminous detail, a Yidam deity and its mandala. And also requires devotion for the Yidam, which, as I mentioned, is a bit difficult for modern people. And also sometimes when they have that devotion for the Yidam, it is at the expense of recognizing the Yidam's empty nature. So then there's Dzogchen-based dream yoga, which is not based on that completion stage style of skill, visualization, does not usually use mantras, does not have as a foundation the ability to visualize, and does not require empowerment or completion of nudra. That being said, they both have as a fundamental foundation devotion. They both require that. So the beautiful thing about the Ati Yoga, dream yoga, is that if you don't have devotion now, it can help you to develop that. So it's interesting in that way. Really, for the sort of Yidam-based dream yogas, you kind of really need to have that devotion in place for it to work. You also need that extraordinary skill with visualization. For many people who are neurodiverse, not possible. But this version that we're going to talk about now is it's not based on that skill. So there's no requirement for Nundro. There's no empowerment needed. And also because it relies on a human teacher, it doesn't, you can start as you are. You don't need to develop the devotion. You don't need to have the devotion to begin with. It can actually be the way or one of the ways that you develop that devotion. Some people would say that that's possibly true for the tantric versions, the Yidam-based as well. But I find that so much effort in those practices is put into the visualization, like getting it right. Like, what ornaments is this Yidam holding? What color is their skin? How many eyes have they got? Do they have a crown? Do they not have a crown? If they have a crown, how many spikes is there? Are they holding a trident? They're not holding a trident. Do they have any other things? Are they standing? Are they sitting? All this. Because you're focused on really getting all that right, there's not a lot of space for developing an open-hearted connection with the Yidam. It can come down the track, certainly, but I think it takes a lot of time. And what we're about in this particular Sangha is about the things that can happen before we die in this life, realistically, that we can achieve in this lifetime. So that's why this version. Once again, Pristine Awareness is an organization that is focused on the Dzogchen Semde teachings and practices. Dream yoga is a sort of aside to that, but it's because it's something that I've always done for a very long time, giving this teaching and having it as an optional thing that you can do. Now, what are the essential practice components of a Dream yoga. Number one, you need to have your object of devotion. So for me, that's Jujun Rinpoche, obviously. But for other people, it can be their human guru. If you have known them long enough that you know there's not going to be any nasty revelations down the track. The tantras say 12 years. A lot of people don't do that, and they go, oh, we can't do that, man. I really think you should. I know that sounds odd, that it's very unfashionable or old-fashioned for me to say that, but you should. If you haven't known a guru for 12 years, like at least, you should not have them as your object of devotion. You should not. That is risky in a way that you don't want. You don't want to make that risk. Now, that being said, there are completely trustworthy beings. Dudon Rinpoche, Kedetogan Amtrin, Shakyamuni Buddha himself, Yeshe Sogyal herself, so many. I always get stumped when I'm trying to list them because there's just too many, really. But you just find a person, it doesn't matter if they're alive, but they need to be human. Togden Shakishri, who's a really great master from the Drukpa Kagyu and Nyingma traditions, he said there's not a hair's width difference between Guru Yoga with a living master and Guru Yoga with a human master who has deceased. There is not a hair's width difference. Both can lead to awakening. Guru Yoga leads to awakening quicker than anything else. So that's what he means. Now, there's lots of examples of this. One really famous example is Jigme Lingpa, Rigzen Jigme Lingpa, who had his guru was Longchenpa, and his Guru Yoga was based on Longchenpa. They're separated by hundreds of years. They did not know each other, but he achieved recognition of the true nature of mind through that Guru Yoga to Longchenpa and awakening through that devotion to Longchenpa. He's one very stark, obvious example, but there are many. And in the Dzogchen Samdo tradition, there's this whole lineage of masters who achieved awakening through Guru Yoga alone. When we talk about Guru Yoga, remember Guru Yoga is always combined with shamatha, with sitting meditation. There's always a moment in your Guru Yoga where you relax into the natural state and you sit in ease. There's always in Guru Yoga a moment where you're in shamatha. So these two things. So shamatha, Guru Yoga, they're core to Dzogchen practice. There's a lot of people going, shamatha is for beginners. It's not a Dzogchen thing. Please, it absolutely is. However, often it takes a different form. So it might take the form of sky gazing. Usually it takes the form of sky gazing. So it takes a different form. But that kind of resting in ease, resting in calm, just relaxing into your nature is what shamatha is, and that's fundamental to Dzogchen. All right, so the components of Dream Yoga are, first, you need your object of devotion. This is the teacher who you visualize. Now, this visualization in Dzogchen, right, because it's premised on devotion, you don't need these elaborate, lucidly clear, precise visualizations because it's the devotion that makes it work. Even when you have the visualization, it's the devotion that makes it work. It's the devotion that makes it work. So long as that's there, or you're open to that arising through the practice, then this will be successful for you. So you choose who you want to choose. I always say, can't go past Shakyamuni Buddha, can't go past, in our lineage, Dudon Rinpoche, Kyabda Togam Amtrin, can't go past Yeshe Sogyal. She's the first Tibetan to become awake, to become a Buddha, to become a living Buddha. You can't go past her. There's a very long list. So choose who that is for you. It needs to, if you don't have devotion right now, it needs to be someone you at least respect, you at least think is interesting, you at least value their contribution to the Dharma, you at least know a little bit of their story, their life story, and what they've achieved, you know. So it's really fundamental to choose someone you like. You know, I know that sounds very ordinary and mundane, but it's an important first step. You know, I just adore Dzogchen Rinpoche. Like, I can't put into words how much affection and trust and love I have for everything that Dzogchen Rinpoche did. So, but you don't have to have that kind of like unwavering trust. You can start with, this is someone I just think is interesting. I respect their contribution to Dharma. I know a little bit about their life story and I really like it. You know, it doesn't, living or dead, doesn't matter. But if they're living, you should have known them 12 years, at least. And you should have talked to their students, their senior students, and sniffed out, is there anything fishy here? Is there anything not quite right here? You know, one of the things that I notice often is that in sanghas where something is a bit fishy, the senior students are cagey, secretive. Not everybody knows everything. There's not openness. There's cliques. There's cliques, you know. So it's really important that whoever you choose, you need to know you can trust them. This is very important. All right, now, second step. As I said, every single practice tradition is a little bit different. I'm going on the practice tradition that comes from, that I was taught by Chogyam Lampa Nobu and from Dzogchen texts and from other teachers who've given me teaching as my Guru Yoga. So, and I've kind of adapted it to myself. But this is not saying it's innovative. It's how it is. So you can do one of two things once you've chosen who your object of devotion is. You can either, and this is something that comes from the Karma Lingpa tradition, which is, quite ancient. It's a term that Karma Lingpa revealed from Padmasambhava, so it's quite ancient. And usually this version has Padmasambhava as the guru. That's the person you choose, right? But it doesn't have to be dominant. You can choose, as I said, Shakyamuni Buddha, Yeshe Sogyal, Dzogchen Rinpoche, Kyabje Dzogchen anyway, Jetsama Tenzin Palmo, also I think completely trustworthy teacher. So anyone you trust, and trust is not trust is not something based on emotions. It's based on evidence. It's not a wishy-washy, fluffy thing. It's evidence. What is the evidence of this person's a trustworthy teacher? What is the evidence over many years, not just, recent? All right. In our tradition, we encourage you to use Shakyamuni Buddha, Dzogchen Rinpoche, Kyabje Dzogchen Amtrön, Yeshe Sogyal, right? Those are the ones we encourage you to use. You can, however, choose someone else. Now, you've chosen them. At this point, the practices, they diverge. So it's right at the beginning, they start to be different. So one version, which comes from the Karma Lingpa tradition, is that and also it's there in the Dzogchen teachings on the Vajrakalaya version of this. And it's also in the Dzogchen teachings about the Dzogchen version of Dream Yoga. One version is the guru is above your head and enters the crown aperture, goes down through your throat chakra, and then comes to rest at your heart chakra. So that's one version. And then the guru is there in your heart, and you take your awareness, put your awareness on your heart where your guru is, right? And then usually there's a prayer, and I'll give you the Dzogchen prayer that is the simplest form of dream yoga that there is. It's less than a page long. It's very super, duper short. Done in your own language, remember. Don't be chanting this in a language you don't speak fluently and a language that is not of your heart. Whatever language you dream in, that's the language you choose. Because this is the language you dream in. If you're trying to impose on dream yoga another language, it's going to create problems, delays. So whatever language you dream in, that's the language you do your prayer in. You say the prayer. Now, as I said, there is a prayer, Dzogchen Rinpoche's prayer, very beautiful, very brief, really easy. You can do that. And I did that probably for 20 years. But then more recently, I noticed in my practice that I was free-forming it. So the last maybe 10 years or something, it just started to free-form. I wasn't choosing to change it or anything. It just free-formed and became a shorthand. So I could pop in bed and put my head on the pillow and do my version of the prayer and then asleep very fast, And something that I found that is really important, which this is a slightly sidebar. If you're not relaxed, this won't work. So as I said, devotion is this like fundamental power behind it. But if you're not relaxed, you think about what happens when you go to bed and you're not relaxed. You lie there, awake, unable to sleep. You take ages to go to sleep and then you sleep fitfully. If you're tense and stressed, you don't sleep well, do you? So you need to be relaxed. So again, as with everything in the Dzogchen Senbei tradition, relax, 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 relax. And another thing about this form of dream yoga is that because you're not doing like the visualizations, you're not trying to have this perfect visualization of the guru. It's just because the devotion's the fuel. So you just have a sense of them, a sense of their face, a sense of their presence. It doesn't have to be this detailed thing. Because you're not doing that, it's easier to be relaxed. It's easier to sort of settle into it. Now, so then you say your little prayer, and the prayer will have a number of components for it to work. It needs supplication to the guru, so a line usually of supplication to the guru. It needs to set the intention. So one of the major parts of dream yoga is this, at the beginning, setting your intention. Next one up is recognition of the dream, right? And then there's 4 things that you then do once you're lucid dreaming. Okay, so to set your intention, the prayer that I'm going to share with you, it clearly sets the intention. And then, which is what? What is our intention? Our intention is to, the one that I say, I've got a few that I say, but when I'm really tired and I'm, going to bed and I really want to go to sleep, lately I've been doing this version. It's just, I've reduced all of the components to just one line, So number 1, you want to recognize the dream that you're in as a dream, right? So you want a lucid dream. So number 1, you need to make that statement. My version, I'll show you the Dzogchen Rinpoche prayer, but mine is Dzogchen Rinpoche, grant me the blessing of being able to recognize dreams as dreams, which I think is quite similar to what he said in his prayers. Because again, I'm not innovating. It's just I've kind of shorthanded it. So that's number 1. You need to ask the guru to grant the blessing that you will recognize the dreams as dreams, right? So you supplicate the guru, which means what? You rise to devotion, and you can do that any way you like. If you don't want to say a prayer, you can read about the guru, their life story, and feel inspired, and feel respect and trust. And then you can, as you're lying down, ask them, can you please grant the blessing of recognizing dreams as dreams, right? Then the second step, second important component, is once you are lucid dreaming, right, two things need to happen. And there are 4 activities that you do in the lucid dream to make these 2 things happen. So what are the 2 things that need to happen? You need to recognize reality as it is, right? You've already done that because you realize you're dreaming. Oh, this dream is not real. It is a dream. So you recognize that. Number 2, recognize your own nature. So you also ask, I think in Dzogchen Rinpoche's prayer it says, may I recognize dreams as the clear light, But another way of saying that is, may I recognize the dream as a manifestation, projection, radiance is the one that I use. Recognize the dream as a radiance of Rigpa, true nature of mind, Buddha nature, right? So you're asking for a few things here. You want to, number 1, recognize the dream. Number 2, once you've recognized the dream and you are lucid dreaming, you need to ask for the blessing to recognize your own nature in the dream and the dream as that, right? This is really important for the daytime practice, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, as well as I'll do more dream yoga stuff tomorrow. But that is really important. Once we recognize that what we're experiencing is the radiance or manifestation or projection of the mind, it really changes your day-to-day life. When everything you see, hear, smell, taste, touch is, radiance of Rigpa, radiance of the Buddha nature, manifestation of awareness. It arises in awareness, abides in awareness, and dissolves back into awareness. So this fundamentally changes how you live, how you are. Okay, now, then the prayer essentially you're asking that through that process of being able to recognize the dream as a dream, once you're lucid dreaming, being able to recognize the true nature of reality and the true nature of mind, and then the final part of the process is to go, why? So that you may be free and all sentient beings may be free. This is fundamental. Without that, what is this but a game of the ego? So I'm repeating it a few times so you kind of really get that it's really very simple, but it has these components. So 1, choose your object of devotion. 2, supplicate the Guru, which can be just feel devotion, and that can happen just by thinking of the Guru, reading about the Guru's life, whatever, right? You have devotion needs to be there. You need to be in that state. It doesn't have to be blow your socks off devotion. It can just be subtle, a feeling of respect and trust. It'll deepen in time. Then you ask for the blessing to be able to recognize dreams as dreams. Then you ask for the blessing to be able to recognize that the dream is a manifestation of awareness, of Rigpa, and that you recognize that all things, in fact, are manifestations of awareness. So what you're shorthand asking for is, may I recognize the true nature of mind, or may I recognize Rigpa, whatever words you want to use, it's all fine. And then, really important, may this happen in order for me to be of benefit to sentient beings, so that we all might be free of suffering, myself and others, right? So now I've written about dream yoga quite a lot, and I've taught about it quite a lot. And there's ta-da, that's it, basically. It's not complicated, is it? It's very simple. It's a setting of intention, right? Now, when you fall asleep and you dream, I'm going to go into this in much more detail tomorrow, because we're running out of time now. But I'll go into detail about once you're asleep, what you do. Remember I said that there's these 4 things, 4 activities that you do while you're asleep, once you're lucid dreaming, 4 things. And they act as proof to you that everything that occurs is a manifestation of mind or awareness, everything, while you're awake and while you're sleeping. And tomorrow we'll also talk about what you do during the day while you're awake to prepare for the dream yoga. So I just want to, at this point, show, like, do you see how simple that is? Right? And this is the thing. A lot of people think this is some kind of watered down dream yoga, you know? This is some kind of like, it's not really dream yoga or something like that. But fundamentally it is. The teachings from Karma Lingpa, right? Remember who Karma Lingpa is. He revealed the Bardo Toro, the very first text that outlines Bardo practice. Very first. It's what we call the 6 yogas of Naropa, 6 yogas of Naguma. They're all preceded by this, the Bardo Toro. Liberation in the intermediate state through hearing is what that translates as. But basically, in that text, he gives a tantric version of dream yoga for those that way inclined, and this version, which is simply the guru entering the heart, making supplication, letting it happen naturally, right? And this is the one that we really see in the Dzogchen tradition. Now, that being said, in the Menagde, you will find, which is the fifth instruction version of Dzogchen, you'll find instead of the guru, you replace that with what's called a semzin, or a seed syllable or symbol, and it's usually ah. You notice I have tattooed on my hand. I don't know if you can see it. There's the camera. I have tattooed on my hand an ah. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. Anyway, I did that 20 something years ago because dream yoga then was my main practice, and dream yoga now is still like very important to me. And this is one of the little tricks you can do once you're lucid dreaming. So I did that there to remind me during the day, this is all a mirage, a fabrication of the mind. But also when I'm asleep, when I start to dream, and it's pretty rare for me. I do have like ordinary dreams, but it's uncommon for me to not know that I'm dreaming. Because as soon as I look at my hand in the dream, I see my tattoo, which is like the R symbol, the R seed symbol or samzin, that says, "Oh, you're dreaming, dude. You're dreaming, buddy. You're dreaming." So as soon as I see my hand in any dream, I know straight away. Ah, yeah, I'm dreaming. So I'm not advocating people do tattoos and stuff like that because they hurt, particularly there on the hand, it hurts. But you can paint a nail. You can wear a bracelet that you wear all the time, or a blessing cord. Before I had the tattoo, I used to paint one of my fingernails, dark blue. But then I couldn't find that color anymore. So you can do all kinds of things. You can have a ring that you wear all the time, blessing cord, as I said, whatever you want. It needs to be something that when you look at it, and the reason why we can, because we can't see our face usually in a dream, but usually we can just hold up our hand and go, oh, right. We can see our hand. So usually it's on the hand, that's why. So it's one of these things. Anyway, we'll go through this in more detail tomorrow. But I just want to say this. This form of dream yoga is not dream yoga light. It's dream yoga supercharged. This form of dream yoga works very fast. It doesn't have the 90% fail rate that lots of tantric dream yoga has. I don't know anyone who's been doing this kind of dream yoga who doesn't within a year, at the minute, the most within a year, start to lucid dream, which is the first step, right? Usually quicker than that, depending on do they have devotion or not, but I know people who no devotion at all, and I've taught them dream yoga, and then within a year, they're lucid dreaming, and then they can start to apply the 4 activities that you do when you lucidly dream, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So I just want to say, this is not easy peasy Japanesey. It is, to quote a really terrible 1980s song, it is simple. There's very little form, which is a marker of it being a Dzogchen thing. The form that it does have is kind of a guru yoga, right? Why? Guru yoga works fast. And then the activities you apply when you're lucid dreaming, they are fun. They have fun. So I won't go into too much detail now, but just quickly, there's you transform, multiply, etc. There's 4 of them, but we'll just talk about, say, transform, because that's the first one you do. So once you've done your little dream yoga prayer, and I'll give you the lungs in a minute, you then just go to sleep with a feeling of devotion in your heart. So something I'll just repeat at this point from Dzogchen Amtring. He said to Jamyang, and then Jamyang expressed this to me. Going to sleep with devotion in your heart will expedite the dream yoga process exponentially. It's sort of all been saying, but also it's what Guru Rinpoche says. Number one reason it doesn't work, no devotion. Reading namtas, which is life story of your teacher or a teacher or any teacher, before going to sleep is the swiftest and easiest way to get this to happen. It's not hard either. It's just reading something fun that you're enjoying, right? Devotion is devotion. It doesn't matter whose namta you read. So you can just choose any master who's, legit. If it elicits devotion, it will help you. Now, this is a little bit radical for a Buddhist group, but it doesn't have to be the life story of a Buddhist master. It could be, like, I have a great deal of affection for Rumi, who was a Sufi mystic, for Hafiz, another Sufi mystic, for Teresa of Avila, Christian mystic, St. John of the Cross, Christian mystic. There's like too many Jewish prophets to mention. Frankly, there's so many great ones. Whoever, you feel Mary, for a lot of Catholics, object of devotion. Jesus, for a lot of Protestants, great object of devotion. They're above reproach. So it doesn't have to be a Buddhist thing you're doing, but it is a Buddhist thing you're doing. But the figure you choose doesn't have to necessarily be a Buddhist master, because maybe you don't have a Buddhist master you feel that for, but you do feel that for, Jesus, Mary, Moses, Rumi, Hafiz, Fatima, the Muslim Fatima, St. Teresa, St. Clare, St. Francis of Assisi. No, it could be anyone who you have devotion for. It's fine. We tend to choose Buddhist masters because we have a system of recognizing them as awake. I suppose the Catholic Church has a similar thing. It's saints and da-da-da. But fully awake is a very rare thing in any religion. But in Buddhism, we have a system of recognizing who the fully awake beings are. So it might be easier to pick someone from the Buddhist tradition. So obviously I use Dzogchen Rinpoche. You can't go past him. Dzogchen Amtrin is the person for whom Jamyang is the most devoted. Can't go past him. Dzogchen Lingpa, can't go past him. Yeshe Sogyo, can't go past her. So many. I always do sort of stagger at this point because the list is a bit too long. So anyone, doesn't matter. So you can get life stories about the people you feel devotion for, and you can read them before bed. You hop into bed, read for half an hour or something, then you do your little prayer, and then you go to sleep. You just go to sleep. Now, about postures, I'm doing all the prep stuff today and tomorrow, the lucid dreaming stuff, what we do in the dream, and what we do during the day. but this is the before sleep prep stuff. Now, most people will benefit from one side or the other. Different traditions say different things. Some say that women should sleep on their left, men should sleep on their right. I personally think that gender is empty, and therefore that doesn't matter. It's but I'm just telling you because that's what some lineages say. Some lineages say that if you have a very active mind, you should sleep on one side as opposed to the other. My experience, however, is whichever side you're comfortable on, sleep on that side. Because as Guru Rinpoche said, Baba, when Yeshe Sogyal asked him, what is the best meditation posture? What was his reply? Everyone in the Sangha who's been around for a while should know this. Whichever posture feels best is best. That's a word-for-word quote. Whichever posture feels best is best. For me, I've always slept a little bit propped up. So not lying flat. That's always been a preference for me for various reasons. Now, some people say to have like a light on in the room so you don't go deep into sleep. That's for the tantric version, where you're relying on generating a luminous visualization. So I do, however, usually leave my window a little bit open to let a little bit of light come in, but it's not required. It's just my preference. So I don't think you need a light on, a little dim light or a candle or a lamp or something like that. I don't personally feel you do, but if that helps you, use it. My niece, when she was a little girl, she had a really cute glowworm night lamp. Use one of them. They're super cute. Use it if you want a little bit of light in there. The reason these things are helpful is because they trigger the idea, which is just like the tattoo on my hand and hanging the fingernail or whatever. It's a reminder, I'm going to do Guru Yoga. So anyway, so you lie down, whatever posture feels best is best. And then you do your little prayer, whichever one you choose. I'm going to give you the Dudron one. And then you, I'll have to do Karma Lingpa tomorrow, it's a little bit longer, but I'll just give you the Dudron prayer today, the link for that. And then you literally just do your prayer, you have devotion in your heart, and you go to sleep, right? So it's very simple, but it's powerful. I mean, it will literally change your life in terms of how you look at things,